let's get started. May 31st, Finance Committee meeting. Welcome.
Welcome. 18 days. That's how many days are remaining until the council meeting on the 17th. Even less so in terms of business days. Really, we have 10 business days, although I know I'll be working most of those 18 days on this piece. I think we're getting a lot closer. With the budget process, we're kind of running multiple streams, though. There's the budget process, but there's also the reconciliation, and then there's also the interview process for the new finance director. We had our first interview yesterday. We've now scored all 26, I think, applications. It was, I think, a good process. I actually liked the way it worked out. There might be some improvements, but we printed out all, it's a difficult task, but we had the entire kind of finance tiger team up there in the war room, print out every single resume, had a rubric for how to score them, had every single person fill out a rubric and put it behind the resume on a giant table. That was multiple hours of work from 8 different people. Now we're aggregating the kind of final scores for the remainder of the top candidates. I'd say roughly at least 5 are very excellent candidates that we'll be bringing in. So in addition to the one we've already interviewed, who was, I think, one of our top candidates. So we'll continue to have, quantitative rubrics. I think it's really important as you score and interview candidates to sort of remove as much bias and discrepancies. It was even interesting yesterday on kind of, I think, hey, somebody has Paychex experience. Well, Carrie and HR may like that. Hey, they have technology experience. Nate, our IT folks might like that. So we got to kind of take a lot of factors into account and get the best candidates interviewed and then scored and see how they fit in with this organization. So excited about that process and kind of continue to build capacity there. Just while we're on the kind of budget, I think the last few things that we're really trying to tie up. One is the capital funding / lack of encumbrances over the last 3 or 4 years with the lack of the count reconciliation and really knowing your true general fund. So working with Adam on, the 1.4 million roughly in roads that wasn't spent last year, how we account for that in this year's budget cycle, so that, and giving you all the options and information. I think that's the last really big piece of the budget changer on, how we want to account for some of that spending that wasn't, or that infrastructure investment that didn't happen previously. And to your point, Steve, on staggering the spend and the increase and not having, again, these big jumps that happen. Or do we feel like this is such a value and a necessary investment in the near term that we need to make that big jump? Or is it something, I think to Michelle's point, that we need to consider additional bonding later in the year to fund, not just considering this cycle, our final chance to sort of do some of those projects, but getting a really dialed in capital improvement plan for the year, 5-year, 10-year. I know, I don't feel like this budget process is kind of the end of that for a lot of these things, but we need the best information, and Adam's coming back early next week, so myself, Mike, and the team are really going to focus on Monday, so that Monday night for the budget presentation, we have better information there. On that note, I've sent out the invites to council for the 2 additional budget review meetings. So we now have Monday, this is coming Monday, and then Tuesday we're doing 2 budget meetings, and then I think the 13th, so the following Thursday, is going to be, so we have 3 more within these 18 days. I'm feeling very confident about where we're at and the work that we're going to do over those next 3 budget meetings. Trying to stagger in just to be a little more deliberate about, maybe we bring in 3 or 4 department heads to kind of focus on their sections as we're going through this, so that we're not just bringing in all the department heads every night.
Maybe I've misunderstood. I thought it was the 4th, which is Tuesday, and the 6th, which is Thursday next week.
I had 3rd, 4th, and 12th.
Yeah, 3rd, 4th, and 12th. But I didn't get those invites either, Charlie.
I'd sent them out this morning.
3rd, 4th, and
This morning?
12th now.
Yeah, it should be near Ellsworth, Maine.
That's what we said.
I thought it was 4, 6, and 12.
We had discussed 4 or 6, but then
Okay.
We determined this.
So 3, 4, and 12.
3, 4, and 12, yes, sir, 60.
Oh,
Okay.
look at that. There it is. Bam.
There we go.
Charlie knew you were gonna ask that. He had it ready.
Yeah, and we're been down administrative assistant for the, I'm feeling that pain. But not just on the administrative, like the comm stuff that Maura's just huge value to this organization. So
Certainly is.
looking forward to getting her back, but also so excited for her. So
Did she have the baby yet?
I haven't heard yet, but we are. It is time. And I've been there a couple. It's I think for all of us who've been there. This when you're a couple days late too, and oh man.
Come on.
Yeah. The if you can, I think some of the other the big things, the reserve account, kind of this was 1.35 in a reserve account that was kind of established for one purpose. I'd say kind of became an orphan and was put aside and not used in the appropriate ways over the last 3 or 4 years. So the question is, how do we recapture that? Do we want to use it there's a variety of ways to run a reserve. I don't think that's really been strategically thought of over the last few years. So now knowing that this really wasn't used as a reserve in the proper way, are there systematic things that we can do to recapture this and use it and fund it as part of this budget cycle? Or do we want to consider alternatives to how organizations run their reserves, their general fund, especially considering how, getting the bonding rate increased? We actually had some conversations already with some other finance directors on how they're running it. So I'm not at a recommendation point yet, but Tammy, I'll probably want to talk to you and Michelle. And Steve, I know had some good comments, and Patrick last time on kind of, okay, now considering we were kind of running a reserve by just whenever the general fund, taking out an undesignated fund balance. That's what was happening before, is the reserve. So these things weren't drawn from or even funded. So knowing that, do we want to sweep the smaller things and run, and run larger reserves on wastewater and water and roads and have the big ticket items? Or do we want to tag all of our assets and facilities? Because if we're going to have Knowlton Park, we should have Erksey, we should have those should all have their own reserve funding. But I want to get options for you all to kind of consider. And this also might be more of a tagging this to the finalization of the reconciliation. So once we actually have your bottom line, this is obligated, not obligated, then maybe that's the more appropriate time to consider these reserves and, supplemental budgeting, capital projects as part of bonding. So, there might also be a decision on whether we hold on this account, reclassification, sweeping, holding as is, increasing to a later date. So,
Well, on that point, I think improving our bond rating is obviously massive for the city, for its finances, but, I think whatever makes sense in these next 18 days, but ultimately, back to what we talked about earlier in the week is, I like the idea, kind of the balance of, is there anything we can use now for this year's budget that makes sense versus making sure we have healthy reserves? I don't know Tammy will know better than I and finance folks, but I like the idea of fewer accounts that are just kind of simpler and making sure that we're using them properly rather than, one for every asset. But again, that's not my area of expertise. I defer to the experts, but it seems to me, keep it simple, right? And but at the same time, making sure we're doing it properly, because ultimately, if we get to improve our bond rating, that's the long-term financial health of the city is, significant.
yeah, that's kind of where, there's limitations on donor funds and this and that, but we also have that within the general fund due to, due from, on as well with donor funding there. So it's kind of how you recapture, and to the bond rating, it's really going to be once the reconciliation happens, we really can't be looking at a bond rating increase until that is complete. That's going to be the biggest one that bonds rating agencies are going to need to see in order to increase the rating. Then they're also going to see, what is our reserve funding, our sort of general. We talked to a finance director yesterday about how they handle it, and that's, they have $5 million, and that's their, and they have a much smaller city size, and that's their reserve, sort of do not go below this to have on hand at all time. So that's how they keep their bond rating high. And what we have is undesignated fund balance, at the reconciliation will kind of give us the trigger for what we have in, and then what is in our reserves. That's, gonna give the bond agencies the math they need, plus the knowledge that our finances are actually now predictable, audited, reconciled. Here's your account area, to get that increase. At the same time, there is the bond bank that we have as well. The private bond market's also pretty high in terms of their rating right now for muni bonds. If this is 3 or 4 years ago and, capturing those muni bonds at a wildly low rate, we are hell-bent on getting it reconciled, but, so there are, I think, financial instruments outside of the private bond market, that's not to say we're not gonna reconcile fast, that even once we get our bond rating back up, we still might wanna consider. But, yep.
To add to a little bit of Patrick's comment, if you look at the HRA history, it runs about 40%. And if you had, I don't know how it affects the bond rating, but if you had reserve accounts that was more generic, not everyone is going to have a catastrophe in the same year. And so if you had those reserve accounts and, Public Works has got a catastrophe we need to draw from, and, many water breaks you need to draw from. I would think of more generic reserve accounts that could qualify, and I don't know how that affects the bonding, but I'm not sure that we need a reserve account for every department, because I don't think every department is going to experience the loss, much like the property and casualty. They run about 41.5% of premiums. So is everyone going to have a catastrophe at the same time? That's one question that I would have if you had one account that you could draw down from when there's a catastrophe. And I don't know what that does to bonds.
So you can consolidate a lot of those specific line items if, kind of try to figure out what works best for us. The ones that have donations or grant funds, that sort of thing, that left over, you want to keep those separate, and wastewater and water need to be kept separate. They're all pooled into that one reserve account with the multiple lines. But I actually really like the idea of just having an HRA reserve so that we would, in case there is a catastrophe.
Well,
I know you're saying that we can just, it's like a general one, but
I'm not saying HRA, I'm saying like the HRA funding, and I don't mean to bring that into it, but what I'm trying to illustrate is that HRA uses about 40% of the plan, and that's true in the health field. Property and casualty is 41.5%. If you're in a captive in property and casualty, the plan is a captive for anything. They're planning on 41.5% of premiums to pay out. So in the reserve account, I'm wondering if the same plan can put together. I'm not saying reserve less money. I'm saying a bigger pool of less categories that each one could pull from. And you guys are very experienced at all that.
We always used to have the undesignated fund balance. To spend out of that, you had to have a council order.
Yeah, I think the
You
issue.
just can't dip into it.
Right.
You have to have a council order to dip into the unfunded,
Designated surplus.
yeah.
even that's considered designated or assigned fund balance of reserve,
Yeah,
so.
yeah,
or-
they're two different things.
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
would still need council approval to take any money out of the assigned fund
For the
balance system.
designated reason.
Yeah, I think the issue I'm running into is if you have as a strategic decision, this is our undesignated reserve level now, and when you're reconciled, you can do that. When you're unreconciled and you make, hey, council's gonna approve this on an undesignated fund balance, but we're not to date on the reconciliation, I can't tell you, well, you can't do that, because you're now going below our threshold of undesignated fund spending, because we don't know what our current threshold and obligations are. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and an adequate amount of reserves, in your undesignated fund balance, exactly what that's at, we won't know that until the reconciliation happens. Is that level adequate? do we need to build, and then as we go throughout the year, how you do contingency funding and then tracking, so that at the end of the year, I can say, here are all the things that council's passed off budget cycle, per the undesignated fund balance. It was this, which ones of these are recurring, and then starting to get like a narrative. And it would be great to have that now, right? I could look, if we were doing this from the beginning, or this was running from, you'd be able to look at the last 10 years and say, here's how councils have done their undesignated fund spending over the years. So really trying to think as an organization that once we are reconciled and, and policies, and this might go bleed into next budget season, it might bleed into bonding, of how we do that. And Tammy, we had a great conversation too on like, earlier on how, when you were here, there would, when there was overspending on certain line items, which happens throughout the years, instead of, okay, well, this line item got overspent, but so we're gonna go to this line item, and, you'd overspend the line items throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, you kind of true up between the accounts that were underspent and overspent, and come to council with a big list of like, IT was over this year, this was under, I'm gonna switch this, council approves. All those policies and procedures are being kind of rebaked back into this.
One of the most important things, sir, is that your fund balances are actually cash.
Yeah,
Paper fund balance, which we as the city have carried for decades, is just on paper. You can't spend paper fund balances. You gotta have the cash in the bank to spend it.
right. Yeah, so lots of, I think, the work will remain even after this this budget cycle, but I'm feeling much better, and I'll feel even better after you both have done your reviews, and I'm happy for all the public. That's why we put it online. Data and feedback is really important and critical. I think last budget meeting we had some good, hey, this, not that, and some good arguments, and continue to have that so we can get a good product here. On that note, some of the other big things was, I think I got initial guidance on some of the ARPA backouts for things that are certain in the budget already. Working on coming back on Monday for that remaining 100,000 in ARPA, and how we want to use that. I know we had initial conversations about with the press coverage on Knowlton Park, not just the press coverage, but the fact that we've been hearing about this for a while. To me, that's sort of a sign of government lack of like responsiveness in many ways. Is like if there's a broken slide and it can't get fixed for a year, 2 years, it sort of is a sign that like if that can't be done, what else can't be? So even though this finance piece is important, I think it's kind of part and parcel to that. Jim is working on kind of getting a replacement there. I think we are going to be. But seeing these reserve fundings for Knowlton Park and the jump playground for $25,000 and Knowlton Park for $16,669, do we want to make or consider as part of this process a larger investment there, a larger investment potentially with surplus ARPA, which would have to be designated. And when I say designated, I don't mean like we're going to do something in Knowlton Park next summer and it's going to be great. Like we got to get vendors, we got to get an idea together. We need community feedback. We're going to have to expend city resources, staff time, if we want to go that route. And then also not spend that 100,000 on a road project that we can essentially not put onto the new mill rate. Decreasing that's not a huge amount, but in terms of the total dollar figure, but. And then the TIF is another part of the budget. Like, do we want to use some of the surplus TIF funding in that area, which couldn't go to a playground, but it could go to some other things that would be additional Knowlton Park upgrades.
I know the walking paths are still an issue, but they have been since it started. For whatever reason, they continue to wash out, and we've spent lots and lots of money trying to fix those and trying different types of material to try to hold it. So, but I know that is an issue that we should look at.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for the TIF money in particular, like that's the type of thing we're lighting for access for
Yep.
particularly the seniors that are living in that housing complex
Yep.
there. Maybe it's to hire someone to shovel those walking paths too in the wintertime, because it's a four-season park, where people can't really access it, during the wintertime if there's snow, and I don't have a ton of snow, like recent winters, but, there's a lot of things you could potentially use that for.
So it's kind of I think, for an inflection point for us on, do we want to use, some of the reserves here that were designated for the jump playground, which doesn't exist anymore. I got to figure out how we can recapture that. I'm assuming we could use that for a playground type activity
Oh, yeah,
still there,
absolutely,
even though
yeah.
it's not that jump playground. And the Knowlton Park Reserve, plus what we are already doing, and do we want to do some, continue just repairs on there, or do we want to find the funding that would be needed to fund a playground replacement and potentially put together a plan for maybe using private donations as well? Allocate an additional amount of ARPA, which has very, specific limitations. It would be for signage and for shades and for lighting and but not for, you couldn't just use it for a new playground. So those pieces, and then TIF for accessibility and walkways, and we'd have to layer in a bunch of things, and not use the TIF and ARPA for other current budget purposes, but,
We should be very sure we can use ARPA or for that park, because I'm not 100% sure we can.
okay. Yeah, I guess that's the other piece.
Recreation isn't included.
It's in a low-income area, but we don't have any low-income census tracts, so I just want to double check with somebody.
Gotcha,
who might know
okay.
better,
Yeah, I thought the Oriole Way was.
We have low-income housing, but we don't have any low-income census tracts in Ellsworth. And so the readings I done was that recreation was supposed to be serving low-income census tracts.
Yeah, I don't know, what I was reading was different than that there was they called it a separate section where they actually released ARPA funding for this. To me, it seems also in line because of the pandemic and people needing to be outside. And
Outside, yeah.
additional use in those kind of areas, it is in line with like the spirit and the intent of ARPA.
There was that piece, but there's the income piece too, which,
Okay.
we just have to get together and look it over.
All right, well, I couldn't quite tell if there was interest from council on that.
Yes.
Is there
There is.
any of the roads being repaired in the TIF zone?
Only the industrial road, so we talked about.
Okay, all right.
And so we're potentially gonna use TIF funding for that road, but.
Okay.
Yeah, just for myself, I'm very,
Microphone closer to you, please.
I'm very interested in that. Likewise, I'm a big supporter. I think we do want, and I like the idea of, Charlie, of you having the fund set aside for new positions, and we don't need to figure it all right now, and giving you that leeway to figure out what makes the most sense. But I think, just to, be clear on the record, I'm very supportive of creating the new Parks and Rec position. And I think this idea of updating Knowlton Park, if we're able to kind of piece it together, it's a great opportunity now with if the ARPA funds work, they're sunsetting. Obviously we can use it towards roads. There's a lot of needs, but Knowlton, personally for my family, it's very important, but I know it is for a lot of people here. And so I would be very supportive of a project that, upgrades Knowlton Park. It's for all ages, right? We have the senior, focus and the exercise and the walk, and it's great for events. We have so many events there in the summer. I think it's a real nexus, community nexus for Ellsworth. So and I don't know where the other council members stand, but I think if there's an opportunity to do it, I think we should, and I'd be happy to help however.
I'd second that.
Okay.
We've needed one for a long time, so a really long time.
Yeah, and some credit goes to Mike Harris here for when we got this fund, and we started going through like line items in the budget, and he's like, wait a second, Knowlton Park here, and then Matt was talking about, so let me think about it. This is, to your point, Matt, I think Matt and I are good in this way. So I'm hot, and he's the sauce of the cools.
Cool sauce.
Cool sauce.
Could
I
the
like it.
creation of the rec department, because it kind of is economic development, we're trying to build on that?
Come out of TIF or out of ARPA?
TIF.
We'll have to have a different conversation about this.
Cool sauce.
I think it's just for trails, but there are some.
It's trail improvement specifically in the
That's
current
it?
in the current TIF plan. It's maintenance, yeah. But
All right.
Can we always, we can update the TIF though.
That's a process.
So that's
It's
the
gonna be-
that's something that Janice budgeted for this year to do.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if that coincides timing wise, if we are updating the TIF and the projects for them, we could maybe
Oh, interesting.
reprioritize what it can go towards.
Not this fiscal year. For FY '25 is when she'll have the plan updated, and then FY '26 would be the year that those priorities would be set and changed.
You're not allowed to change your TIF districts at an off-budget cycle?
Well, it's a process. I'm saying, like, you
The funding.
could change the district, I guess, next fiscal year, but then if you're gonna take the money from the district and spend it on the Parks and Rec position, that would have to be for FY '26.
Like you were saying, because of the way.
Right, because it has to be part of the TIF plan that's
Right.
approved by
Sure,
the state.
sure, I
So
mean-
that's why I was like, can we,
See,
is
if
there
they're-
any way we can?
So maybe that we're staggering at both funding sources, but also fiscal cycles.
Yeah,
I
because
don't
you're
know.
you can change the TIFs next week, or 6 weeks from now, but after the budget's passed and the taxes have gone out.
Right.
You're not gonna be able to like take the capture from the TIF to spend on X. That might be until you capture it and then spend it that
Correct,
way.
and it would have to be, and they use an April 1st date because that's your
Yeah.
assessment date, so it would probably have to be April 2025. So that's when, and then start at July 1st, so that we
You
can
can
capture
actually
it.
use the OAV of the prior year for a new TIF.
Yep,
Yeah, so it could be 2024, but we wouldn't be able to use it until 2025.
Correct.
So, yeah.
yep.
And this might actually help with the, whether it's the 150 aside for sort of organizational design and how we do that. And then my concern with that and with the ARPA spending on staff members is like you're spending something on something you're gonna add, but then you have to keep it after the ARPA leaves. With TIF, that's a different story. If you know, economic development is funded through TIF and Jana's position. If we rearrange that and fund recreation through TIF, then it is, something we're not putting on the taxpayer, which, based on a 1-year, infusion, which, is the problem with spending ARPA on, like, hey, we'll do this. Well, then the taxpayer's gonna take it over the next year. Whereas with TIF, if you realign it, the TIF is kind of paying for that going forward.
Yeah, and you probably wanna find a way to have a TIF that's specifically helping fund it moving forward, like we have different TIFs that are currently paying off debt services for other things that are kind of assigned, so.
Right. Well, great, that's, my last piece is, this is the finance committee time. I actually had an email last night from a citizen just on accessibility of timing for meetings, and didn't like that the finance committee meeting is at 8 AM. And they work 8:30 to 5:30 and would like to come more often, and, I don't know, it does work for me as part of my, and I think I don't know for council, and it's in this weekly, but I just wanted to bring it up. It was mentioned, and I don't know when else we'd do it, but.
It's really hard for me to even, like, because it used to be 7 to 8, so it's a struggle for me to even come from, like, I have to leave here in just a couple minutes, so.
So would earlier be better for people, or?
It's not for you.
Not for
Not for
me.
me, right.
The reason it was moved from 7:15 to 8 is to accommodate people to be on the finance committee.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and it works for me.
8 works great with, I think, a lot of people, because we didn't have participation from departments before.
Yeah.
So I think 8, and I'm sorry about that citizen.
Look at Saturdays, maybe.
No.
That
I draw the
that
line.
can't do it, but it is online, and,
Yeah, I think that's the, and maybe we're trying to figure out some better way for online participation in real time, better for those that can't make it, or after the action, but it works for me because I'm able to still drop my son off at school and make it
That's
into.
exactly why.
8 o'clock
And
is
it's-
perfect
we changed
for
it,
me.
yeah.
but
Make it work.
it's
Yeah, we
not
could,
about-
and we could make it a Zoom, and we could allow, if public wants to participate, if people are there, we can allow for public comment at certain periods. I think that's,
It's just one person, right? That's.
Yep.
Yeah.
well,
As of now,
if it
yeah.
becomes more than one person.
Yes, I
it's
agree,
something to
yes, but
consider.
if that's,
And yeah, we saw that with trying to schedule additional budget meetings, right? That's gonna take 25 minutes of everybody's schedule here.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll keep for now, try and be responsive here, but,
I mean, it's online. They can send us emails if there's any questions from the finance committee and.
yep.
so, for right now, anyways.
For right now.
And the only other thing I can think of would be like Thursday evening, but again, I don't want.
I can't
any-
think of that.
You can't think of that, okay. Yeah, I don't want another, okay.
I like eight, I like. our
8's gonna work.
Our 8 a.m. meetings are fun. We get Friday, it's exciting,
Yeah.
until Matt cools everything off.
Yeah, cools off.
Cools
Can't have too much fun.
Yeah.
This
no.
work.
Great. Yeah, like I said, I had some other small things that I just might be adding to the budget, just to add the service centers and, in terms of their mill rates and comparative analysis, just so it gives a more high-level view of where Ellsworth's at in comparison to other, like, cities and towns, even though this,
That's great for the public, you know, that now that it's accessible online and everything, the public can see that, and
Yeah.
also for the city and the council, but yeah.
and then, we can do the HR line item for employee appreciation, which isn't a huge budget, but I think it just creates more transparency, across the departments. And I think a good mechanism with Carrie, for having sort of, you know, if we finalize the, moving forward with her, a specialist there, I think that's a big part, is just that she'll be able to start tracking across departments, training, and, you know, which is a significant part of our line item, budgets, employee appreciation, you know, a lot of those pieces. She has a great knack for a lot of the budget stuff, and especially as part of this budget process being together, we're creating institutional knowledge that I'd, you know, of department heads and others with a lot more deep understanding of the entire organization, so. Oh, and the last piece was the COLA, that was the, I think Michelle's recommendation was to get a 2, 3, and 4, and what the budget increase would be based on those COLAs. I think typically it's been 2 or 3 in the past, and there was a 5 because of the inflationary pieces, in previous budget cycles, but we're gonna, like, as I said, some department heads in the initial rounds were kind of putting in their COLAs already. Some department heads were basing it, for the new union funding, and some weren't. We kind of did an across-the-board 3% just in the benefits side, but we're gonna go through the department heads again on what their payroll numbers are. Really just back out any COLA increase from that, back out any COLA increase from the benefits now, and then just get you the, here are the numbers, for benefits and payroll at a 2, 3, and 4%, just so you all have the information on what that would do to the mill rate.
Great.
Great. Send it over to Nate.
I'll keep it brief, I know we're running out of time, but
Sorry.
Nope.
I have to come back. What time is supposed to be here? 11?
11, yep.
Yeah, okay.
But working with the auditor and his team on, obviously, the FY '23 audit, that's been a constant focus of myself and the team. Obviously, the budget book, which we got out on Wednesday night. Also, Tuesday, I sent out the request for proposal for the TAN for FY '25. I believe I sent it out to 7 banks. I put a deadline of next Friday, June 7th, so hopefully see some bids coming in for that. Worked with the school on their SRF application, which was approved. It had to be in by this Friday. We got it on Wednesday, so everything looked good. So that's kind of been my week, and obviously, like I said, the big thing is just obviously the FY '23 audit, which we actually have the auditor coming in at 9 today, so.
You rock.
Look at that, good job.
Thank you.
IT Nate. But that's kind of been the week, and obviously the focus of myself and the team, and we're just gonna keep trucking until that audit's done, so. That's where we're at.
Great. Anything from our?
Make him sign that out.
Right?
Well, it's online, so we're gonna, I think we'll see where we're at.
Do you have anything that you want to?
Anything you need to add?
On the link for the online version of the budget, can we post that on the front page of the city's website? I looked, I can't find the damn thing. I mean, I'll admit it was a fast look. Can we also post it on the Facebook page, please?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just for anybody listening, it's ellsworthmaine.gov/budget is the link. So we tried to make an easy link, but I'll make sure it's better, more prominent on the website as well.
Thank
Yep,
you.
sure. And yeah, this is the draft budget.
Yeah.
But to that point, citizens, yourselves, review, be critical, let us know. I think it's actually kind of a unique opportunity to crowdsource any discrepancies or things that aren't in there I want to know about, and we want to fix. Because one of our big transparency and collaboration, not just from this group, but from the public, I think is really important here. So, thanks so much.
One further comment is, could that be the City Hall copy that's out for anyone to walk in and look through come Monday?
Maybe we'll make another. We
I'll
do
say
have one
yes,
more
we're gonna
binder.
do
This one too.
We'll say this is the Citizen Pro edition for copy and edits, and then we'll have one that we label as like "Please remain in City Hall" that people can also
Don't write it.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Yeah, don't write it in. So,
Thank you.
sure. Thank you all.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thanks for all the hard work, guys.
Fantastic conversation. I figured we didn't have a